I was driving through parts of rural central Texas the other day, and I noticed that farmers were already beginning to prepare their fields for planting. One farmer I saw was standing in front of the windshield of his massive planter, spraying Windex on the glass to wipe clean the accumulation of dust and dirt. There is something magical, almost hypnotic about the plowed furrows of a field. There is a neatness and orderliness about it that is somehow deeply satisfying. In today's lectionary reading from the Gospel of Mark, we encounter a very different way of farming, one that on the surface makes very little sense to our modern sensibilities, but which makes an excellent illustration about the ways of the kingdom of heaven. Turns out, God is a pretty inefficient farmer, and that's a good thing. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. Today's reading from Mark begins a section in which Jesus tells a variety of parables about the kingdom of heaven. Since it is the first in a series, we get not only the parable that he tells the crowd, but also his interpretation, which he tells only his disciples. After this one, he tells his parables without interpretation, leaving us with the task of understanding his meaning. Today I'll read only the parable itself and refer you to the verses where Jesus gives the interpretation. I'm interested in just one facet of this multifaceted parable, but one that tells us a lot about God. Once again, Jesus began to teach beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there while the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. He began to teach them many things in parables, and in his teaching he said to them, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil, and when the sun rose, it was scorched, since it had no root. It withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into good soil, and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And he said, Let anyone with ears to hear listen." When we hear references to agricultural practices in the Bible, it is only natural that our minds conjure up images of modern practices. In our world, farmers work hard to prepare their fields and make them as profitable as possible. In part, this means planting in specific ways so that nearly every seed planted will produce an abundant crop by harvest time. Farmers like the one I saw the other day plow their fields and prepare ahead of time even before they sow seeds. Then they sow them and they carefully water the fields as needed and apply both fertilizer and pest control agents to ensure an abundant crop. They know exactly when to sow and exactly when to harvest. The whole process has become so extremely efficient and high-tech. GPS systems installed in planters and harvesters are able to guide the massive machines exactly where they need to go with an accuracy of just a very few inches. Modern farming, in other words, aims to be as efficient as possible, using the fewest inputs, which after all cost money, for the most abundant harvest. So now, forget all that. That's not how farming worked in the time of Jesus in the area around the Sea of Galilee. In the first place, plowing came second, only after seeds had been cast. The process looked something like this. A farmer would take a bag of seeds for whatever kind of crop he intended to grow and go out into the field, walking up and down and back and forth, methodically taking a handful of seeds and broadcasting by hand. It's not too different from the way we often put fertilizer on our lawns with a broadcast spreader. The only difference was that it was done by hand. Next, a farmer might plow the field in order to work the seeds into the soil. But besides working the seeds into the soil, two other things would happen. First, the process of plowing the field would result in whatever other weeds and plants happen to be there also being planted. The predictable result? Weeds growing alongside the intended crop. The second thing that would happen, and this becomes obvious when you see the countryside, the plow would run into rocks just under the surface. The result? Places where the cast seeds would not be able to grow, or if they did, they'd wither as soon as the sun came out. You see, from the perspective of modern agriculture, this is not a very efficient way to plant. But then again, that's the point of the parable, isn't it? Given that the seed is, according to Jesus' explanation, it's the word, or more precisely, the good news of the kingdom of heaven, efficiency is not the point. Spreading the word as broadly as possible is the point. Even knowing that the good news may sometimes fall on deaf ears or be forgotten in the busyness of daily life, the point is that the good news be spread as far and wide as possible. If God's purpose isn't to be efficient, but rather to spread the word as widely as possible, it turns out modern farming isn't a very good model. Much better to be a little inefficient, even wasteful, in the service of spreading the good news. Tomorrow, a few more parables about the kingdom. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.